Hello everyone, it's Deb again. So I thought I would share my hot cocoa mix recipe with you guys tonight. I am in the house, in the kitchen, and this is a recipe that I've been making for almost 10 years. And I first got the original recipe from Alton Brown on Food Network, and I tweaked it quite heavily. And so I just started out, when I started making it, I did a quarter batch just to test it, and then I made a bigger batch, and that was, I think, in January of 2013. And then the next winter, in December, so that's the same year, but the next winter, I tweaked it again, and then I did it again one more time in late winter of 2014, and after that I have not needed to touch it. So that's my recipe right there, and I have not needed to adjust it anymore after that. And I use organic ingredients as usual, just because I'm trying to avoid pesticides and everything. And I've got actually some powdered milk left over. This was, I think this was Organic Valley powdered milk, or it's not powdered sugar, it's powdered milk, sorry. And so it's just powdered milk, powdered sugar, cocoa, and a few other things. And I will put Alton Brown's recipe, or the link to his recipe, down there, and then I'll write out my recipe also in the description box. And you can try it his way first, or whatever, if you want to try this recipe. And so I've got to use up this. This is what I was using, and I had bought like 25-pound bag of whole dry milk, and so this is just what was left over, but I know that that's not enough, and so I went ahead and I got another bag from Azure Standard, and it's organic too. And this is the cocoa powder, cacao, however you want to say it. Now, Alton does prefer to use Dutch processed cocoa powder, and that would be like Hershey's or whatever, and it's a lot darker in color, and they treat it with an alkali so that it's milder and it's darker in color. But there's not a lot of different organic cocoa powders available, and I found this one years ago and I really liked it, and I actually bought several bags of it, and I think this is the very last bag that I have left over, and it's cold processed, but it's not Dutch processed. But it doesn't really matter. I don't think it matters. Like, if you want it to be a darker hot chocolate, then you would probably want to use like something like Hershey's or Ghirardelli or something like that. And then I just use, this is Wholesome, the brand, powdered sugar. And what I did was I basically doubled Alton's recipe and then cut down on the sugar, because I try to use the least amount of sugar as possible while it still tastes good. And what I have here is just a sieve. And unfortunately I got rid of all my big mixing bowls, and so now I'm just using this storage container thing here. And I used to just run all the ingredients through the food processor, but that's kind of messy and it's really not necessary. And so I just use a metal strainer sieve, and I just push the ingredients through. And so that I'm not putting all one layer of powdered milk and then one layer of cocoa, I just alternate it as I'm going, so that it's easier to mix up and it's a lot more uniform, because this makes a pretty big batch. And so he was calling for 2.5 cups of powdered milk, and I doubled that to 5 cups. And you'll see, if you compare our recipes, you'll see the difference. He was using 2 teaspoons of cornstarch in this, and I found that to be unnecessary. And so that's one of the major changes that I made. I cut way down on the sugar and also the cornstarch. And I do it through the sieve, You may not be able to see that with that in the way. This is really messy. I do it through the sieve because especially the powdered sugar and the cocoa can be really clumpy. So that was 1 cup. And I'm just kind of doing this on the cutting board here so that if I slop anything, I can put it back into the bowl. Without it getting on the countertop. And so yeah, it's not the same as using a dark cocoa powder, but I think it's still okay. And I use a whole bag. I use a 16-ounce bag. And basically the recipe that I finally came up to, it's kind of for taste and for convenience. And so I just put about 1/3 of that bag in there. And this is where it comes in handy to just push on. I'm just pushing on the ingredients, pushing it through with the back of the bottom of the measuring cup. And I don't measure the powdered sugar anymore because I made it easy on myself and I just use a 16-ounce bag, because when I was experimenting the first time, I measured it out at 3 cups and it weighed 14 ounces. But then that, of course, infuriated me. And so I just was like, okay, I'm just going to use a 16-ounce bag so that I don't have to measure it or anything. But you just keep pushing it down. You could use the back of a spoon too. And let's see if I can get this open. This one's a little bit harder. It's going to make more of a mess. I don't know if you guys can see my apron or not. My mom painted that for me many years ago. Many years ago. Probably at least 20 years. My son's going to be 21 this year. I know it's at least that old. Oh, see? I knew I was going to do that. So I'm going to try to save this. And I just use the back of a knife to measure it off. And see, I can't save it. Hold on. Now I'm really making a mess. This is probably, definitely, one of the messiest recipes I've ever made. And it's because it's all this free-flowing powder here. So now the cutting board's basically clean, so now I can scrape it off, and then the excess can go back into the bag. And sometimes it's hard to scrape off because it's so clumpy that it leaves big gaping holes. I don't know if you can see that or not, but that's how much the overflow was. So I've got these flexible cutting boards. And I can just dump it right back in there. I'm not wasting anything. And that's all I need on that was 2 cups of cacao, cocoa, whatever you want to call it. And I'm just going to put like a half of this, or a third. I don't want to overflow the sieve. So that was probably about a third of that. So I'm just putting enough in there. Not putting too much in there because if I start messing around with it, it'll come out the sides. And this is really lumpy. And so I don't want to take part in that. So I'm going back to the powdered milk. And this will be my 3rd cup. I use 5 cups of this. Now that that's gone, I'm not sure if you'll be able to tell the color difference, but this powdered milk is quite a bit lighter in color than this one. This is quite yellow. So quite honestly, this was probably a better quality. This stuff from Azure is probably better quality. And it's really clumpy, super clumpy. I used to use the food processor, but it's just as easy to use this sieve. So that's 3 cups. The powdered milk. Uh-oh, my light's flickering. This overhead light has been going out for like 3 years. My ex has not fixed it yet. And he does electrical work, so whatever. He also works 2 jobs, so he doesn't have a lot of time. But yeah, sorry about that. The lighting's gonna be weird on me this time. Some more of the sugar. And I guess just that you don't have to painfully watch me doing this. Well, I want to show you one thing before I stop here. It's that because this makes so much, that it's really a good idea to stop halfway through. And I use a wire whisk, this one, to just start stirring it in before you get too deep. Probably can't see that because that's in the way. But you can see the layers starting to blend and everything. And if I were to wait until I got everything in the bowl, this would not be as easy to get evenly distributed. In Alton, in the recipe, it does not say, it just says combine all ingredients in a mixing bowl and incorporate evenly. He doesn't even tell you to put it through a sieve, but I'm telling you to put it through this sieve, because if you don't, it's just going to be clumpy. And that's not how you get it when you buy this stuff pre-made. It's not clumpy like that, unless it's old. So that was 3 cups of that. Going back to the cocoa. I wish I had a different metal sieve, but this is what I have to work with. I think I'm going to switch to this one because it's a little bit easier to manage in this size. And I'm going to go back to the sugar. And I just go back and forth so that, you know, it does most of the mixing for me if I'm going back and forth instead of dumping everything in at once. But yeah, this has a lot more milk fat in it from the looks of it. Oh, I don't know if you saw that, but those are just huge chunks coming out of there. Oh, I know. Okay, I've got to take some of that back. This is a mess. Oh, those are huge chunks. You could never get away with just dumping it in there and whisking it up with a whisk, because a whisk by itself is not going to work. Sorry. But yeah, I need a sieve that has 2 of these things instead of just the one, because this is not very stable. I'm just working with what I have. This is the sieve I will bring with me on the road. And I don't have a lot of room in my rig, so I can't really go any bigger with one of these things. I have a plastic, or it's not plastic, it's a nylon one one up in the cabinet that's going to be staying here, and it has two little legs or wings or whatever, and it hooks onto the side of your bowl. But I'm going to be keeping that one here. One more of the milk. And if you go a little bit over, it's okay. I mean, this isn't rocket science. Oh. I would like it to be close, but whatever. Look at that big chunk right there. And whatever goes on the cutting board, I'll just dump it right back in here. So that was number 5 on the powdered milk. And I use whole milk. A lot of people use non-fat milk, but I like the whole milk. Just bouncing back and forth. What I forgot to bounce back and forth with, and I should have already gotten it out, was the salt and the cornstarch. So I've got just a little bit more to do. So let me finish that, and I've got to get the corn, or I actually use tapioca starch and some spices, so hold on a second. Alright, so Alton uses cornstarch, I use tapioca starch. For his recipe, which I basically doubled, he was using 2 teaspoons of cornstarch, and I found that to be way too much. And I've even doubled his recipe, and I still use way less than that. I only use a teaspoon. So if I were to double his, that would have been 4 teaspoons of cornstarch, and I only use 1 teaspoon. And I also use pink salt, pink Himalayan salt. And if I were to double his, it would be 2 teaspoons, and I'm only using 1 teaspoon. So again, I did tweak this recipe quite a bit. So I measure the salt first because that's really clean, and then I can go into that and get a teaspoon of the tapioca starch. And I've stopped putting everything else in because this is actually, I should have done this a little bit earlier. So I'm just going to try to evenly sprinkle that in. And then he uses a pinch of cayenne. And so I use cayenne, which I don't measure it and I don't pinch it. I'm just kind of barely sprinkling it in there. And then I also add a little bit of cinnamon. And these are herbs that I get from Mountain Rose Herbs. They're all organic. And I guess I use about the same amount of cinnamon as I do the cayenne. And now I can finish putting all this other stuff back in here. This is the last of the powdered sugar. And that's it. The amount that you use, he actually says fill your mug half full with the mixture and pour in hot water. And that's about right. I scratched that out and wrote 1/3. I think it really depends on the size of your mug. So it's about what I've come up to after a few years was it's about 3 heaping tablespoons to, you know, about 8 to 10 ounces of water. And it does almost fill up half the mug. It's more about a third. And then the rest of the, oh sorry, cocoa powder. Ringing your bell here. And then I'm done with all this stuff. And get rid of it. You see all that that's left in there? I'm going to run that through the sieve as well. See, I don't like how it can't hang on the side of the bowl. I'm not done with that one. And I already put it in the sink. The little one. I gotta use the big one. Okay. So that's it. You can kind of see the different layers. But then as you mix it in, it'll become nice and cohesive. Hopefully this video didn't get too long. But you can tell that this is not super dark because I'm not using Hershey's. I guess it just depends on what kind of chocolate you like. But like they've got a recipe for hot chocolate on the back of that cacao bag, and there's no milk in it. It's just the cacao with palm sugar and water. And I'm like, okay, no. No, that's not creamy enough. And so that's why I like to use these recipes that already have the powdered milk in there. That way you just heat up the hot water and you don't have to worry about adding hot milk or warming up milk, you know, because a lot of times you can scald milk when you're trying to warm it up. And so I'd rather just not do that. And you can see it's pretty much evenly distributed. You can't tell one layer from another or one color from another. It's very pale. And some people may not like that. I think that's probably why Alton Brown says to use the Dutch process, because most people expect a much darker color when we're doing this. So let me show you if I can here. That's what it looks like. I'm not sure how well the camera and the lighting is going to work, but it's not very dark. Not very dark at all, but it has enough chocolate flavor, so that's okay. And this is actually my son's mug. And I will transfer this. Oh, now I'm going to make a mess because I'm trying to catch this on camera. Hi, Stella. Hi. Hello. My kitten's making an appearance. See, I'm making a mess already. Yeah, that's about a third of the way full. And so I'll transfer this to a few different canning jars probably. But then when I add the water to this, I get it almost boiling, but not quite boiling. And then I add the water probably just about halfway, and I start stirring it, and then I add a little bit more and a little bit more, and as I'm adding it, I stir it up from the bottom because there's so much down in there in the cup that if you were to add the water all at once and start stirring it, you'd probably overflow it, or you would not get the stuff that's at the very bottom. So I just start out with a half cup of water and start stirring it and getting it up all the way from the bottom, and then I finish up almost to the top. I usually do add a little bit of half and half at the end, and that makes it even more creamy. So this is how we like it, and it lasts a couple months in the winter. I made it a little bit too late, but I think we'll still be able to go through all of this. So pardon the mess. I'll clean that up here in a minute. Alright guys, hope you're doing well. Talk to you later. Bye. Okay, I forgot I wanted to show you how I fill these jars. These are wide mouth canning jars. This is a quart size, 32 ounce, and these are wide mouth. And this is a wide mouth funnel that sits down in it. And this is the best way that I found to fill these jars. And I don't, like, this is that 2-cup measure. I'm not filling it all the way. I'm just getting enough in there. And the reason why I use canning jars is because they're easy, and I can also give these away as gifts, which is one of the things I was doing with them years ago. And I just shake it down and it will settle just like that. But yeah, I was giving these away as gifts and stuff like that many years ago. And the reason why I'm not making a cup right now is because I've already started drinking wine. So I'm not going to mix hot chocolate with wine. But I'll put lids on these. But I just want to also let you know that once I've filled this, as I'm drinking it, I keep the spoon with me, and I usually just kind of have it sitting like that. But before I take another drink, I will go in and give it a stir, because this really likes to settle down into the bottom of the cup. And so if you were to just drink this slowly without ever stirring it, by the time you got to the bottom, there would just be a bunch of mud, basically. And so every time before I take a drink, because I don't gulp this down. If I were gulping it down, then that would not be an issue. But I drink stuff very slowly. And so every time I go to take a drink, I just take my spoon and stir it up and take a sip. And then I put my spoon back up there, because I don't like to have this sitting down in the hot chocolate the whole time. You know, sometimes I have a plate next to me. I can set it down on a plate, but normally it'll just sit up there like that. Alright guys, I mean it this time. Talk to you later. Bye.